All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're diving deep into a topic that I think really gets the imagination going: conspiracies, secret societies, and cover-ups. You've given us a ton of material to work with: books on classic conspiracy theories, excerpts on secret societies, and articles about alleged cover-ups. It seems like you're ready to uncover some hidden truths.
It is a fascinating collection, and I think it says a lot about us humans, how we try to make sense of the world, especially when things feel a bit uncertain
Yeah.
or out of our control.
And that's what we're going to explore today. What are the recurring patterns in these theories? What makes them so alluring? And what can they tell us about how people perceive power and authority? There's this concept that really stood out to me. In Robert Anton Wilson's Everything is Under Control, this idea of collective nouns, he says that humans tend to treat abstract concepts like the Jews, the patriarchy, or the Illuminati as if they were actually concrete entities like a chair or a tree.
Yeah, and this tendency, as Wilson points out, is really fertile ground for conspiracy theories. It's a way to simplify the world. Instead of trying to understand all the complex individual actions and motivations, it's much easier to imagine a single group pulling the strings, offering clear explanations for events that might otherwise feel random or chaotic.
Right, it's almost like we need to give these abstract forces, like a face, a name, to really grasp them. So how does this actually play out in the specific conspiracy theories we're looking at today?
Well, take the Freemasons, for example. They pop up in several of your sources, often depicted as this, shadowy cabal controlling global finance. The details might differ. Some link them to the Illuminati, others to ancient mystical orders. But the core idea is the same: a secretive group with immense power, operating outside of public scrutiny.
Exactly, and this ties into our fascination with secret societies in general. There's something really captivating about this idea of hidden knowledge, hidden power, peeking behind the curtain to see who's really in control. We see this not just with the Freemasons, but also with groups like the Illuminati, the Council on Foreign Relations, even the Grand Loge Alpina, which in one of your excerpts is described as having this almost mythical influence over financial markets.
Exactly. Secret societies, by their very nature, tap into our curiosity. They invite speculation. They allow us to project our fears and anxieties onto these hidden groups. But it's important to remember that, historically, secret societies have served a variety of purposes. Some were mainly social clubs, others were involved in political activism. And yes, some did have a lot of influence, but rarely in the all-encompassing way that conspiracy theories often suggest.
That's a really good point. It's easy to get swept up in the drama, but we have to remember the historical context and not assume that every secret handshake or coded message is evidence of some grand, sinister plan.
Exactly. It's about recognizing the spectrum of belief. Yeah, there's a difference between acknowledging that some groups operate with some secrecy and believing that they control every aspect of our lives. And that brings us to another key element of conspiracy theories: the search for answers.
You're right. A lot of the sources you provided, they delve into alleged cover-ups. The Roswell incident, Area 51, the JFK assassination, even the death of Ron Brown. These events are often shrouded in mystery. They spark endless speculation and debate.
And that's where the true crime aspect of conspiracy theories comes in. You see, they don't just offer an explanation. They offer a whole narrative, a story, with villains and victims, motives and clues. We crave those answers, that closure, especially when we're dealing with events that just seem random or unjust.
Oh, yeah, I get that. These cover-up theories almost become like detective stories, inviting us to piece together the clues, to expose the hidden truth. It's like we can't help but try to solve the mystery, even if the evidence is thin or circumstantial.
Precisely. And the fact that there's this lack of definitive answers just fuels our curiosity even more. Like, take
Right.
the Roswell incident, for example. Was it a weather balloon, like the government said? Or was it something more, was it evidence of extraterrestrial life? That ambiguity lets people fill in the gaps with their own beliefs, their own interpretations.
I see what you mean. So even if we don't buy into the craziest theories, there's still a part of us that's drawn to the possibility, to the idea that there might be something more going on. Like we all have this collective fascination with the unknown.
Exactly. And that fascination is often tied to a really deep-seated distrust of authority, especially government authority, whether it's Area 51 and those rumors about alien secrets, or the belief that the government was behind the JFK assassination. These theories highlight our anxieties about who's really in control and whether we can trust those in power to tell us the truth.
As we're talking, I'm noticing a theme here. It's not just about the specific events or the groups involved. There's this underlying sense of unease, this suspicion that we're not being told the whole story.
You've hit on a really crucial point. You see, at their core, Conspiracy theories often reflect our relationship with power. They give voice to our anxieties about powerful institutions, governments, the media, corporations, and how they might manipulate or control us.
It's almost like these theories provide a framework for understanding the world, a way of making sense of things that might otherwise feel just completely overwhelming or inexplicable. But how does this actually play out on an individual level? We have all this source material that focuses on specific figures within the world of conspiracy theories. Charles Fort, Jack Parsons, even David Icke. What can we learn from their stories?
That's where things get really interesting. Because by exploring the lives and motivations of these individuals, we can actually gain a much deeper understanding of how conspiracy theories take root and spread, and what needs they might fulfill on a personal level. Yeah, it's like peering into a psychological lens, isn't it? Trying to understand the human element within these grand narratives.
So let's zoom in a bit. Let's take a closer look at someone like Charles Fort. Your material describes him as a bit of an eccentric, obsessed with documenting anomalies, things that science couldn't easily explain.
Ford was fascinated by those cracks in the official narrative, the unexplained events that challenged the conventional wisdom. He collected all these stories of strange phenomena, rains of frogs, objects falling from the sky, anything that defied easy categorization. And in a way, that's what many conspiracy theorists do as well. They're drawn to those anomalies, those inconsistencies, the things that make you question everything you thought you knew.
So instead of just accepting the official explanation, they dig deeper. They try to find a more satisfying truth, a more subversive truth, maybe. But could this search for answers also lead people down some pretty wild paths?
Oh, absolutely. The desire for answers, for a clear explanation, it can sometimes blind us to how complex reality really is. And this is especially true when we're dealing with events that are inherently traumatic or shrouded in secrecy.
Yeah.
Like, think about the JFK assassination. It was such a shocking and pivotal event. And the official explanation just left so many people feeling unsatisfied, like there were still pieces of the puzzle missing.
Right. It's like a wound that never fully healed, leaving behind this void that just begs to be filled. And conspiracy theories rush in, offering alternative narratives, pointing fingers at different culprits, each one tapping into a different set of fears or beliefs about how the world works.
Exactly. You've got theories implicating the mafia, Fidel Castro, the CIA, even Lyndon B. Johnson.
Mm.
Each one offers a different interpretation, a different lens through which to view the event. But what's fascinating is that regardless of the specific details, these theories often share a common thread. This deep distrust of those in power, this suspicion that the truth is being hidden from us.
It's like the ultimate betrayal. This idea that the people we trust to protect us, to lead us, might actually be involved in something sinister. And that fear, that sense of vulnerability, it can be incredibly potent. It drives people to seek answers, even if those answers lead them down some pretty dark rabbit holes.
And sometimes, the people who get most deeply entangled in these conspiracy theories are those who suffered the most, those who've experienced trauma or loss firsthand. Their pain, their confusion, it can make them especially susceptible to these narratives that offer a sense of order, a sense of control, in a world that feels increasingly chaotic.
That reminds me of some of the material you shared about alien abductions. The accounts are often so harrowing, filled with a sense of helplessness and violation. And it's easy to see how someone who believes they've been through something like that might be drawn to a worldview that offers an explanation, however fantastical, for what they've experienced.
Exactly. It's about finding a narrative that makes sense of their experiences, even if that narrative involves extraterrestrial beings or government conspiracies. It's a way of reclaiming a sense of agency, of feeling like they're not simply victims of random events, but part of a larger, albeit hidden, story.
But isn't there a danger in getting too caught up in these narratives? At what point does healthy skepticism cross the line into paranoia?
That's the big question, isn't it? Where do we draw the line between critical thinking and delusion? It's a delicate balance. And it's important to remember that not everyone who entertains a conspiracy theory is a full-blown believer.
That's a good point. It's easy to lump everyone who questions the official narrative together, but I imagine there's actually a wide range of engagement with these theories, right?
Oh, absolutely. For some people, it might just be a passing curiosity, like a fleeting fascination with the unknown. For others, it might be a much more deeply held belief system, something that shapes their whole worldview. And there's everything in between. But I think the real key difference lies in one's ability to remain open to alternative perspectives, to really consider the evidence objectively, and to be willing to change their mind when presented with new information.
So it's about maintaining that healthy skepticism, about not letting our desire for answers blind us to the possibility that we might be wrong. But how do we actually navigate this, this complex landscape? How do we separate credible information from misinformation? Especially in this day and age when conspiracy theories can spread so quickly online.
That's the challenge we all face in today's information environment, isn't it? We're just bombarded with all these competing claims, and it's really up to each of us to develop those critical thinking skills, the skills we need to evaluate the information we encounter. It's about recognizing our own biases, being wary of confirmation bias, and being willing to question our assumptions even when it's uncomfortable.
Right. It's like flexing our mental muscles,
Hmm?
training ourselves to think critically, to separate fact from fiction. But it can be incredibly difficult, especially when we're dealing with topics that are so emotionally charged or deeply personal.
You're absolutely right, and it's important to remember that people who believe in conspiracy theories, they're not necessarily irrational or malicious. They're often driven by those very basic human needs, the need for meaning, for connection, for a sense of order in a world that can often feel chaotic and unpredictable.
So maybe instead of just dismissing them outright, we should try to understand where they're coming from, what anxieties or experiences might be shaping their beliefs. But how do we actually have these conversations without getting bogged down in arguments or talking past each other?
It takes empathy, active listening, a willingness to really engage with different perspectives, even when we disagree. It's about recognizing that people who hold different beliefs than us, they're not our enemies. They're often just trying to make sense of the world, just like we are.
It sounds like finding that common ground, that space for respectful dialogue, is crucial, especially when we're talking about something as sensitive as conspiracy theories. It's so easy for these conversations to turn into like shouting matches or accusations, which doesn't really help anyone. It just makes things worse.
You're absolutely right. We have to resist that urge to just dismiss people who believe in these things,
Yeah.
to label them as irrational or gullible. Remember, these theories often tap into very real anxieties, very real fears about the world. Take the death of Ron Brown, for example. It's not just a historical event. It's a tragedy that continues to haunt people, to perplex people, even today. The circumstances surrounding his death were undeniably strange, and the lack of a clear explanation really created this fertile ground for speculation, for conspiracy theories.
Yeah, and it makes sense that people would search for alternative explanations, especially when the official story leaves so many questions unanswered. It's like a puzzle with missing pieces, and our minds naturally try to fill in those gaps, even if it means speculating or making conjectures.
Exactly. And when there's no concrete evidence, those gaps were often filled with fear, with suspicion, and this deep-seated distrust of those in power. Was Brown's death an accident? Or was it sabotage? Was it part of a larger cover-up? These questions just linger. They fuel our imagination. They make people search for answers, even if those answers take them down a dark path.
Right. It's almost like the desire for certainty, for a clear-cut explanation. It overrides our critical thinking skills. It makes us vulnerable to stories that confirm what we already suspect, even if those stories are based on weak evidence or even lies.
We crave order, we crave meaning. And sometimes we're willing to sacrifice logic and reason just to get that feeling of closure. And that's when things can get really dangerous. Because when conspiracy theories become entrenched, when they turn into rigid belief systems, they can have a really huge impact on individuals and on society as a whole.
You mean how they can erode trust in institutions, create divisions in communities,
Yeah.
and even incite violence? We've seen that happen time and time again throughout history, and it seems like social media has just made these things even worse.
Absolutely. Social media has created these echo chambers where people only see information that confirms what they already believe. So it becomes even harder to challenge those beliefs or have a conversation with someone who sees things differently.
Yeah.
And this can lead to some really terrible consequences. Increased polarization, the spread of misinformation, even real-world harm.
Wow, that's pretty sobering. It sounds like navigating all of this requires a delicate balance, a healthy skepticism of authority, a willingness to question the official story, but also a commitment to thinking critically, to looking at evidence objectively, and recognizing our own biases. It's about finding that sweet spot between curiosity and gullibility, between seeking truth and falling for delusion.
And maybe most importantly, it's about remembering our shared humanity. Recognizing that people who believe in conspiracy theories aren't inherently bad or irrational. They're often just trying to make sense of a world that can feel really complex and overwhelming. And if we can approach these conversations with empathy and understanding, we might actually find a way to bridge those divides that these theories so often create.
That's a really powerful message. So, as we wrap up our deep dive into the world of conspiracies, secret societies, and cover ups, what are some key takeaways you would leave our listener with?
I would say the most important thing is to stay curious, but also to stay critical. Don't be afraid to question things, to question the official narrative, but do so with a discerning eye. Be willing to look at different points of view and be committed to seeking out credible information. And remember, understanding the psychology behind these theories, understanding the human needs that they fulfill, can be just as important as debunking the theories themselves.
That's a great point. It's not about winning arguments or proving who's right. It's about understanding why people believe what they believe. It's about understanding how we all try to make sense of the world and the dangers of letting fear and suspicion cloud our judgment.
Exactly. And if we can keep those things in mind, we can navigate this landscape with more awareness, more discernment,
Hmm.
and more compassion.
Well said. Thanks for joining us on this journey into the world of conspiracy theories. We hope this has given you some new insights, some food for thought, and maybe even a new appreciation for critical thinking and empathy in our world. Until next time, keep exploring, keep questioning, and keep those minds open.